I'll be actually making some future looking statements here, which may come up in the discussion as well. So it's covered under the safe harbor agreement. It's a fine print, right? So I hope you guys can read it. Here is a quick view into the agenda. So what I want to do today is to introduce Cloud Integration Framework. You may have seen this in other sessions, but it's good for level set. Then I'll take you kind of deep dive into Integration Gateway. I'll spend some time actually on the use cases, sample use cases, so that you guys get an idea how to use Integration Gateway. And we have good case studies from customers who have already implemented Integration Gateway. We'll talk you through that, the benefits, the pains they have gone through, and then we can open up for Q&A. We'll reserve enough time for Q&A, so we'll take the questions at the end. And for those of you who are celebrating Diwali, happy Diwali. Yeah. So, so there was a survey done actually by MuleSoft like a year ago in terms of what are the typical challenges in a cloud application development. So one of the key takeaway was 90% of the respondents said integration development is a common and the biggest hurdle, right? So, and you can imagine, right, integrations are complex. Although there's been, I mean, the actual patterns in terms of integration patterns, how do you integrate files, how do you integrate messages, that patterns have not changed. They've been around for a long time. But the technology changes actually what makes it harder, right? So, I mean, integration development, you know, is complex. So I think, how many of you are here actual integration developers? Good, I'm making a case for you. You can ask for raises now, right? So yeah, it's complex, right? So this is why you see the matured cloud platforms like, you know, big ones like ServiceNow and so on, or Salesforce have integration frameworks, right? To help to make it easier to build custom integrations. And in a typical integration framework, so what you really get is you get best practices, you get utilities, you get adapters, you get recipes or standardized integrations, right? All this makes that integration framework powerful. And this is exactly what we did. We are kind of on in the similar journey with Guidewire. So Guidewire Cloud Integration Framework here, just to give you an idea where the integration framework sits in the overall GWCP platform. So it's part of what we call application services, or you may have heard about application platform. They kind of mean the same thing. So application services have two key aspects, right? Serves two key aspects. One is the integration services, and there's other services in the app services too, like for example, which helps facilitate the configuration of the core applications like Claim Center, X Centers, right? An example would be cloud rules. You have heard about workflow, right? But the focus of the presentation today, it's Cloud Integration Framework. So let's zoom into this Cloud Integration Framework, what the capabilities are. Basically, Cloud Integration Framework has three key capabilities. One is the Insurance Cloud API. This is a standard inbound REST API to integrate into the InsuranceSuite to access the data, to access the functions or capability of InsuranceSuite. And it's been there since the launch of GWCP, right? So anybody who is actually working with GWCP, I'm sure like you have some exposure and you've worked with the API in some capacity. App events, which is just, I think it's GA today, right? So if any of you went to Simon's presentations, he talked about the app events. But this is a standard way to publish outbound messages when there are events happening in the X Center. As an example, let's say a claim was created, a policy was created, or a claim was denied. All these events, when these happen, app events can publish an outbound message, right? Integration Gateway, you know, which is the key topic for today, it helps you think of it as a bridge between the InsuranceSuite and third-party applications, right? It can help you with connectivity, transformation, and so on. And we'll zoom into this. So before I kind of get into the integration gateway, I just want to kind of share how all these integration capabilities come together. On the left hand side, you see the InsuranceSuite, and on the right hand side you see an external system. So you have Cloud API, which is like the standard inbound REST API where an external system can call into InsuranceSuite. You have app events when something happens in your core system which can publish outbound messages onto a webhook, or anybody who actually subscribes to the webhook can actually listen to those. And then you have REST client which can make a direct call to an external system, right. So this is how all these come together. Now, although I don't know if you noticed this, right, these are all point to point integrations, right, and it's fine like in a smaller project, but as in when you have like tens, 50s, 100 integrations, how do you manage these point to point integrations? It gets very difficult, right. It's not impossible, but it gets very difficult, right. So and also like if you think about it, the more point integrations you have in this app, the app becomes bigger, it becomes fatter, right. You have a lot of these integrations sitting in there. And this is where if you look at most enterprises, they use the mediation layer. And integration gateway is the kind of the mediation layer between the InsuranceSuite and your external systems. And you can manage all the mediations here, okay. So let's like double click into the integration gateway. So one thing before kind of spending getting into deeper, why people ask like what's the problem with traditional approach? When I mean traditional approach, all the integrations are sitting in the X center, right. So there are very obvious problems, right, for people who actually spent working on these. One, there is a lack of separation between the functional logic and the integration logic, right. They're all combined into one thing. But if you look at real practices, right, at least in the larger companies, integration development is a separate practice, right. The skill set is different. They know how to make transform protocols, how to connect to different systems and so on, right. So there's lack of separation between these two. So we want to make sure that we enable that, right. We enable the real practice, how things work in real world. And then also when you have integrations embedded in the monolithic apps, what happens is every time you want to change, let's say you change the payload, if there's a new payload, now you have to go redeploy the entire app, right, as opposed to just changing that integration, right. And that becomes like costly. It's more risk because you're now redeploying the entire app, right. So and then also upgrades becomes complicated. Whenever you actually make these changes, it's very complicated. In fact, I was at one of the companies. They run the payroll system for America. You can guess who. So they had. I was talking to the CTO, and he said, "Oh, you know what?" I said, "You can actually make these changes," and he was like terrified. Why? How do I make changes? So it's simple. You just have to make a couple lines of code to change. He said we had 4 million lines of COBOL code. Nobody wants to touch it, right? That's what happens, right? So when you keep on building stuff into one app, it gets bigger and people are just scared to touch it, right? So we want to kind of fix that problem as well. And last but not least, you need specialized skills, right? So how do we address these challenges? This is why we are building this fit for purpose integration paths based on Camel framework, right? And we'll talk about the Camel framework. So the integration gateway, like we were saying, it's a mediation layer. Here it helps you bridge between the InsuranceSuite and your third-party services. I just want to make sure that let that sink in, right? We're not talking about integration gateway being a replacement for your middleware infrastructure. It's not about mediating any app in an enterprise to any app in an enterprise. This is about bridging InsuranceSuite with a third party. That's what the mediation layer is about, right? So what does it do? It can help you connect with any API interface. Within Guidewire, if you're integrating within Guidewire, it can talk to cloud APIs, can talk to app events. If you're talking to external systems, any web API, REST, SOAP, right? Or file integrations, let's say you're integrating with S3 or messaging, JMS, Kafka and so on, right? It can do any of that connectivity. And it can work with any protocol, like modern OAuths, right? If you have legacy systems, I'm sure like everyone has legacy systems, WS security, yeah, I mean, so from a transformation point of view, again the same thing. It can help you transform any data format to another data format, like JSON to XML or XML to CSVs, right? So you have all that capability in here. And then orchestrate any interaction pattern. What I mean here is, so Camel has, it was actually built to help solve common 40+ integration patterns, right? And within that you have a lot of interactions, sync, async, real-time, batch. You can do any of that with here, right? So that's how comprehensive the integration gateway here is. So how it works, it's actually pretty aligned with how you work with InsuranceSuite. So one InsuranceSuite project has multiple sub-projects. So each sub-project is an integration gateway app, right? Let's say you have one insurance suite app, and let's say you're building 3 integrations. That really means you're actually building 3 sub-projects, each of them having their own DevOps CI/CD life, and then DevOps lifecycle, right? So, and the DevOps is actually pretty straightforward. What you do is you develop locally in your IDE, we call it intelligent IDE. But once you do that, you commit to your repo, and that kicks off the build and validation and everything, and then it actually deployed as a single tenant app in your environment, right? So you can see that it's very aligned in terms of the DevOps lifecycle is very aligned with how you've been working with IS. So by the way, I might use integration gateway and IG interchangeably. So we call IG passionately within Guidewire, so I'm kind of used to that, but I might use that. So let's talk about some of the key features. So how is this all possible, right? So integration gateway is actually based on Camel open source. Camel does a lot of heavy lifting, and I'll tell you why. So I don't know how many of you have looked at Camel, but Camel is one of the most vibrant and active ecosystems. The last I checked, there was about 900+ contributors. There's 60,000+ commits so far, and 450 forks, right? And there's about, I think, 370 components, which was built by vendors for Camel. So you can see how comprehensive and how extensive and how active the community is, right? So we're actually happy so far, right, to actually base this on Camel. So, and you can see that, Camel provides, like they have like non-core, core components. Core components actually comes from Apache, like REST component and so on. And then you have non-core components. These are built by vendors. Like the last I checked, AWS has about 20 components contributed to Camel. Azure has about a bunch of components, right? So it's vast, it's big, right? Now, why do we build our own components on top of this, right? So honestly, it's not like we want to build more components, but if we see gaps or we can provide additional value on top of the existing Camel components, we want to do that. As an example, like S3, right? So when you're working with S3 buckets, it's pain to actually give the bucket name and everything, right? So we actually built our Guidewire S3 component on AW2 S3 component, where you don't even have to do the bucket name, and we'll actually go resolve that for you, right? So we have time to live. You can actually set time to live at the bucket level. So these are the kind of enhancements we think beyond where it makes sense, right, to beyond the standard component tree. Another one is, you see app events, right? If you're actually working with app events, the app event component can help you read the application events and the snapshots, right? So that's the kind of value. So it's not like we want to bring a lot of this, but we will, whenever we see value, we actually add additional components. Right now we have queue, we have app events, and we have S3, right? We might actually build more as we see more use cases. There's also, we have some utilities to help speed up the development. As an example, we have logger, right, logging utility. So what this does is when you are working with in a Camel route, you wanted to log something, we can connect that to the Guidewire GWCP logging facility, right. We actually make it easier. When you log it, we know what logging facility is configured, we can just go log it, right. So these are the kind of utilities. For example, authentication. When you're working with Guidewire Identity Hub, you need to have token exchange, right. We can help facilitate that. So these are some of the utilities we are adding, and we'll add more, right. But that's where we are today. We also have a DevOps UI, which you'll see. This is our goal or end state where we want to get to is that a developer can come into the UI to be able to manage the entire life cycle of the integration app, right. And I can show you, a few screenshots how you do that. And the other feature, which is obvious sometimes, but it's not obvious, is observability. So when you have an integration embedded in the X center, you want to get visibility of what's happening with this integration. It is difficult because it's embedded somewhere else. Now because this is running in its own microservice, you can actually get visibility at the integration app level, right. So that's the beauty of this new architecture. Okay. This is the DevOps UI here, what you are seeing. So if you have worked with Guidewire Cloud, we have the GCC Guidewire Cloud Console. That's where you actually go to manage all your environments, all your projects, and so on. So integration gateway apps is actually built into this Guidewire Cloud Console. It's not like you have to go to separate UI. You're actually getting the same embedded experience here from the GCC. So you can see there, there's a bunch of integration apps listed, what their provisioning status is and so on, right. And you can actually, click into one of that and you can actually get more details. So, I mean, this is just kind of a screen flow where you can come in, create a new integration app and so it actually now you have an integration app created. So there's some lag time when you actually create app because it's creating a Bitbucket repo for you, for the developer, right. And it's actually creating a team city. It might usually take, couple minutes, but we actually do the entire CI/CD for you, right. So it just so you can actually see the status of it. And once you have that created, right, so you have this, Bitbucket repo. This is where the developers go in, write the code, commit their code. So everything else is, when you create an integration app, this is set up for the developer, right. And so also is the team city, the CI/CD, right. So once you have that, let's say you commit the code to the repo, right, and it kicks off the build, and you can do some validation, test cases, and then you can publish to generate a Docker image, and then you can actually deploy it to one of the environments, right. So all of this is pre-packaged for you. That makes the integration development easier. So one of the things, when we started with integration gateway, when we actually were starting to build this, there was this request, okay, we have this app, we want to know where this is deployed to, all the environments it's deployed to, right. So we actually added that capability recently, right. So where you can see that it's actually deployed to test dev 2, it can actually show you what version it is deployed, right. So you get full visibility of where the integration app is running and what the status is, what the build is, right. So that's again, you get the benefits like because we are part of the GCC console, you actually get all those benefits. And then you can also see that from here, we made the navigation easier. You can actually go to the source, which actually takes you to the bit. So you get the full 360-degree view of the app, right, where it's deployed, how do you get to the source, how do you get to the team city from there, how do you view the logs, everything. So we can kind of have a 360-degree view of it. And as you guys try this, let us know if you have more feedback. Again, we are open to listening to the feedback and making changes, right. But what we have here is so far help from customers like you who actually work with us, given the feedback. So we were able to create this 360-degree view of the integration app. Okay. So let me spend a couple minutes on the how do you actually use this, right. So this is an example of an inbound integration where you get a glass claims file from the vendor and you want to use it, right, in the InsuranceSuite. So as is approach is really the traditional approach where you don't have integration gateway, right. So what happens is you actually have to go write Gosu code for handling these files from S3 location. You have to write code to split them to the individual records, and then you have to write code, more code to parse these records, right, and so on, right. So you can see that there's like lot more code you actually have to write. And in the integration gateway approach, and you can see the benefits here is that one, you can actually use Camel file component to be able to read the files. So that's no code, almost like no code, right. And then you have, once you get that file, you actually have, you can actually use the Camel low code DSL to be able to quickly parse the records from that file. So the net is you are one, I mean there's various benefits with this, right. One, you are able to move the logic and externalize from your core application or InsuranceSuite and outside so that you can be more agile, and you are eliminating lot of code, right, because you're using Camel components, you're actually using the low code DSL, and the low code DSL is very, very powerful, right. If you were to write 20 lines of code from when you do that in a Camel route just using Camel, it will boil down to a couple lines actually. It's that simple, right. So that's the benefit you actually get with Camel. And then also like Camel provides a lot of componentry besides the file component, right. You actually have other components you can check out. And then because it's actually running outside the integration gate, outside the InsuranceSuite, you can scale your integrations as you need, right. So for example, I mean it's a cloud service, so you can actually get all the cloud properties. If you wanted to say that, okay, I'm making this payment integration, right, and that's something which hits million times a day, you can actually scale to that level because it's actually sitting outside, right. So this is one example. This is another example. It's an example of outbound integration, right. So we have two cloud integration components here. So again in the as-is code, right, so you're actually writing bunch of code to actually create custom events you want to fire when something happens, and then you also have bunch of code to be able to plug it into basically you write the part of the transport plugin to send that messages to the vendors or the JMS broker here, right. So with app events, it's very effortless because app events can automatically generate messages when these events happen, right. So app events is doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. So once that happens, now you can send that events to the integration gateway to do additional transformation. You can do whatever you want, right, again using the low code DSL. So you see how the paradigm shift from everything in one place, now you're actually using multiple cloud integration components together to solve this problem, right. So again similarly there's so much benefit. One, like if you're leveraging in this scenario app events, there's no code, and you're actually using low code, mainly the Java DSL, and then again it's all microservices, right, some of the benefits. So just to give an idea of like couple use cases on this using integration gateway. So this is kind of the futures, right. So you can see that there's bunch of integrations listed here. So all these integrations have been built on integration gateway architecture or cloud integration framework architecture. So there's two flavors actually. One is vendor specific integrations and vendor agnostic integrations. You can see as an example we're talking about LexisNexis, right. So there's a LexisNexis claims file for Claim Center. So think of these as templates, right, where you can take these, most probably use as is or tweak a little bit, right, but you still have to make changes on the InsuranceSuite side. If you wanted to, let's say if you have a police report, you wanted to add a PCF, you still have to make some changes on the InsuranceSuite, but the actual integration gateway app itself, so you actually have a ready-made template for you, right. But like as an example, like glass claims for Claim Center, which is in the vendor agnostic as well. So there's some, these are all built by our delivery teams, by the way. So they already built for LexisNexis, right? But let's say you have a vendor in your local, in your local markets where you need to build a glass claim files, right? You can take that template and add, rest of the code, right? So this is really, really powerful because, and that was the intent with the integration gateway anyway, right? The idea is, you can build custom integrations, but custom integrations don't always have to start from scratch. You can start from templates, right? So these will be in the marketplace soon. I don't have a date, but it will be soon. Okay. So I'll share a couple case studies we worked with some early, one of them is early customers, right? So this customer was trying to build this new kind of rental insurance where you go on the website, enter some information, get a code, and a policy is issued, right? So they wanted to build something like this very, very quickly because they were competing with other people in this place. And they set like about, I think, 5 to 6 months was the timeline to get this solution up and running. How do you do that in 5 to 6 months, right? So, well, I mean, so they say, okay, well, we wanted to use Guidewire Cloud because everything is available. We don't have to install machine, we don't have to do all that stuff, right? And then we told them about integration gateway, right? This was an early customer where they can quickly build integration. So, what was amazing is they actually went live in 5 months with Guidewire Cloud and integration gateway. And we were just trying to measure, it's not always like science, it's a little bit of art and science on how do you measure things in terms of efficiency and value. So Guidewire, just the integration gateway, because with the new architecture, they could accelerate the time to market by 3 months, right? And the way they did this is they started with one integration, SafeLight, and then they did the next one and then the next one, right? So they didn't really have to do a lot of heavy lifting on the InsuranceSuite side. And just to other data point we got from them is like roughly, right? It was 1% a year savings using the Guidewire Cloud architecture and integration gateway as opposed to the traditional architecture. Because they were Guidewire customer, they knew what it takes, but when they compared, they said about 1% year savings. So this is a great use case for us, right, to kind of share because one, I mean, this will, as you guys are evaluating our solutions, right, you can think of this new paradigm because it helps you get faster time to market. So this is another customer, which was an existing customer. They were planning to move all these lines of business, farm, liability, inland. Again, they approached us. We told them cloud is the best way to go, right? And then we talked to them about integration gateway as well. One of the things actually what is interesting in this case study is they built about 15 integrations total, and 9 of them were the common integration I showed you on the other slide. So they only had to build 6 new integrations. 9 of them where they actually used our common integrations, right? Because this was delivery led, they know what they wanted, so they could actually use all those common services, right? And again, this is where you actually get the benefit of like time to market when you're actually using existing templates. So that was, and of course they were happy in generally in terms of this new paradigm. Hey, you know what, I'm trying to move the logic externally, it's more agile, I can make changes quickly, right? So, and so on, all these benefits. So you can see on the right hand side, some of the integrations listed here. And like I said, some of them came from the common integrations because we actually already have them. The delivery team already has them. So they use that, and then some of them, they actually had to build it. So how do I get started, right? I mean, there's a lot of customers, I think Diego talked about 20% of the customers are actually on cloud, but 80% are still on-prem or self-managed. And there's a lot of customers who are actually evaluating moving to cloud, right? So one of the common questions we get is, do we have to rewrite all the integrations? No, the answer is no. So we don't force you to rewrite any of your integrations. You can actually bring them as is and run them, right? But let's say if you are building a new line of business, right, and you have to build a bunch of integrations, we definitely want to encourage you to actually use this integration gateway. Or you see we talked about the common integrations, right? You think like, okay, I have all these integrations, it's costing me too much to maintain, I might rather use the common integrations, right? That would be, I call it value driven refactoring. If there are integrations which are, which you can actually use, that's another, option. So anyway, so just to kind of net it out, if you are moving to cloud, you don't have to migrate to this new architecture. You can run those as is, right? I just want to make that clear. Yeah, so the key takeaways is that one, because you can externalize the integration logic from the InsuranceSuite, you can evolve this at your own pace. That actually makes it more agile. It speeds up development and it helps you decompose this large monolithic app. And then you are able to get a lot more productivity. So I think once developers start looking at it, working with Camel, they can appreciate. When I keep emphasizing on the low code Camel DSL, you can see it for yourself once you start working with it, right? It's actually huge. So that's one big benefit because it's, it actually gives you the productivity. And because it's a microservice, cloud microservice, you get all the cloud properties. Theoretically, it's infinitely scalable. That's what the cloud, the value is, right? So you can scale, your the integration app, and then you get observability at the app level, right? And then all this, right, leads to faster time to market. So one of the things you think about when you start about, moving, externalizing all this logic, yes, you get the benefits of decomposing a big app into multiple apps, but the real benefit to me is you can innovate faster, right? That's the real benefit and that's the real outcome you should be looking at. There's some resources for you. I think you'll have this deck. So we have a persona-based documentation. So you have something called Integration Developer Guide, right? It tells you how to actually work with integration gateways. We have something called Cloud Standards. Because this is an open framework, you can do a lot of stuff, right? So there are Camel components to go write IT automation stuff. There are Camel components to go write bots, right? But that's not what we really want you to do, right? So Cloud Standards actually helps you keep honest on what you should not be doing. So there's a lot of anti-patterns there as well. And then we have training now for integration gateway. So you can actually go to the training portal, you can search for it. And then we have a couple blog posts as well, right? How to get started with Camel. It has actually a lot of links. It gives you training, some different websites on how to actually get educated by yourself on Camel. And then if you have missed this session, Simplifying Cloud Integration with App Events, yeah, please go check out the recording. And then we also have another one tomorrow, Smart Approach to Common Third-Party Integrations. The slide I showed you about all the common integrations, they're going to talk deeper about it, right? That's a good session for you to get into as well. Yeah, ask me anything. Yes.
We're in an on-prem InsuranceSuite, and so I'm trying to, when I hear this, I'm trying to understand when we go to the cloud, is this something that you would see as a replacement for a service bus or a supplement where, we would go through this in addition to what we have? I don't know if that makes sense.
So you already have a ESB,
yeah,
right? And you're actually using Camel for integrations, and
yes,
you work with the ESB.
Yep.
So like I was saying, the integration gateway is not a replacement for your enterprise service bus, right? Because this is tailored just for InsuranceSuite to broker between the InsuranceSuite and your other external apps. It's not a replacement for, so let's say if you have 100 apps in your enterprise, this is not the solution. It's not going to connect from any app to any app. This is just on the left hand side, think of it as InsuranceSuite.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, this is Ajit from Accenture. So in your use case, you predominantly covered all the outbound events, and then you have an S3 based inbound events. So I have a question on the REST API calls as inbound API calls.
Okay.
We are thinking to use integration gateway as a mediator in between to isolate the call to system API. So what is your thought on that? And second one is, are you thinking of having any accelerator for talking to system APIs?
So you can talk to APIs today. When you mean accelerators, are you looking for something more than what we offer today, or?
Yeah. So one of the things that we heard earlier was like using integration gateway as a mediator is going to help you in two ways. One is you are not tightly coupled with the system APIs because you are going through the integration gateway, right? So like our use case, digital experience, what we are thinking is to go through integration gateway to talk to system APIs.
Okay.
So that way we don't need to directly go to the fine-grained system APIs. So we are going to have domain-driven apps in integration gateway, which will talk to system APIs.
Right. So I think what you're saying is, let's say you have more like think of as a use case API, which has multiple granular system API calls. Right. Yeah, I mean, we have seen some customers actually doing that, right? It's a okay approach where, because it really depends, right, case to case. If this use case API where you're doing a lot of business logic, right, integration gateway may not be the best place, but we have also seen in some cases where you have multiple granular API calls using integration gateway for that. Yeah.
All right.
And then we can chat with you if you have more questions on like some of the things we have seen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wing from Travelers. My question is, you mentioned earlier, as we migrate from on-prem to cloud, we can keep the existing integration, like event messaging. And for new one, we can adopt it, or at our own pace, we can switch over gradually. So my question is really, do you see over time in the longer run, will be discouraged from using the existing, whether it's from maintainability, scalability for performance? Do you see the longer term, the existing pattern will be like deprecated or discouraged over time?
Well, it won't be deprecated. You'd still be able to use that, right? But would you want to use a new paradigm? I would think yes, right? All the benefits we talked about, right? So over longer term, like you said, if there are, my recommendation has been, if you're writing all these new integrations, you should be looking at this, right? I know it's it's heavy investment to go back and change, and we won't really encourage you to do that. You can bring all those integrations, but I would look at as all the new integrations, we definitely encourage you to use integration gateway.
So I have a question. So
yes.
My name is Annamalai. So is there any additional cost for using this, or it's all included in the cloud licensing?
It is included in the cloud license.
So irrespective of the number of integration gateway you spin off, there is no additional cost?
There's no additional, it's not a chargeable component, if that's the question. No.
So when you do an InsuranceSuite implementation, there are certain integrations which are common across all three components, like claims, billing, and policy.
Yeah.
Currently, you have to manage those integrations across three source codes repository.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, I just want to validate, I'm assuming if you create an integration app, you can use that across all three components. So for example,
possibly, right?
Let's say address validation, right? And I want to use address validation across all three senders. Mm-hmm. If I create an app event or app, can I use the same app for all three senders?
Right. If you're talking about, let's say you have address verification and it just goes to a third party to verify the address, and that you want to use from a PC, BC, yeah, you can possibly use, right? As long as you're talking about in the same InsuranceSuite, right?
Correct.
The same deployment of InsuranceSuite, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, thank you. I know I'm between, I'm between you guys and the happy hour. It's not the best place to be, but hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.